Hello everybody, welcome. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing another guide for League of Legends. This one's going to be about Soraka, so thank you very much to Mr. Magpie and Disciple of Yawgmoth for the generous donations to sponsor this guide. And just on a special aside, Yawgmoth was one of my favorite characters from Magic the Gathering. I really loved it back in Urza Saga. Yawgmoth's Will, my favorite card of all time, so that's an awesome name. I think we talked about that on stream a few weeks ago, so thank you very much for the sponsorship, and thanks for having the awesome name as well. So what we're going to do in this guide, we're going to talk about first why you would want to pick Soraka, sort of the situations she's good in, and then we will talk about the Soraka basics, her abilities, and the best way to optimize those. I want to talk about sort of her overall strengths, weaknesses, matchups, items, runes, masteries. I have a special section based on a 7.9 prediction because I think that she's going to get a lot stronger, like astronomically stronger in 7.9. So a lot of people are thinking about tanks in 7.9. I'm thinking about Soraka in 7.9. So we'll see how that's going to interact. So that's going to be a pretty lengthy section as well in the middle if you're kind of looking towards the future. I'm making this in 7.8 right now. So if you're watching this in the future, I don't know anything about 7.9 other than what's on the public beta server right now. So this is strictly predictions. So some of it may go totally wrong, and I may also be totally right about it. So who knows? We'll see. As soon as that patch gets released, obviously I'm going to have just massive content, just give you everything you could ever want to know about that patch, because there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. But I'm going to go ahead here in the Soraka guide, so a lot of people will probably be interested in what I have to think about that, because I think it's going to massively buff Soraka, and we'll talk about why that is. And then we're going to talk about the laning phase with Soraka, and we'll talk about team fighting with Soraka, and I have a Soraka game called up here, and we'll sort of walk through some gameplay at the end and put some of these principles into practice. And then if you want to sponsor a guide, then just email me at thestrategyprofessor@gmail.com. I'll have the link in the description. You can also find all of my other guides right here that I have for specific champions. I also do topical guides, and I'll show you all of that at the end as well. And I do coaching playlists. So for $20, it's about an hour-long coaching session. You just send me a replay. I create a Google Doc just like this, going over some stuff that I see in your op.gg, talking about sort of the pregame, what you should be thinking about before the replay that you send me, in terms of team compositions and how you might expect the game to go down. We'll watch the game, take a lot of notes, and then at the very end, I'll collate it, bring it all together, and give you the best recommendations for improvement. So if you want to see what those are like, I also have a coaching playlist right here. So even if you don't have $20 laying around for a donation, which I understand, I'm a poor person as well, you can still go through and watch a lot of these coaching videos, I think, and gain a lot of insight from them. So I highly recommend checking those out. But we'll go over more of that at the very end of the video. You can get access to this Google Doc in the description if you'd like. So you can follow along, or if you don't have time to watch the whole thing, it'll probably be about an hour long. Then you can always just go through and just sort of skim the sections that you want to skim, and then just tune in for maybe that 15 or 20 minutes that you really want to watch. So if you think you're already really strong with the Soraka basics, you understand her abilities and such, then you might just skip down and then just check out what I have to say about her matchups and then what I think is going to happen in 7.9, for example. So I try to put a little bit in here for everybody, from the very novice Soraka players all the way up to my level, or maybe even a little bit higher of Soraka players. Now, I'm not a Soraka mastermind by any means. I have played her some in the past, and I've thought very deeply about her on a theoretical level. But I'm not like a one-trick, 5 million Soraka point type of person. So, I think I have some good advice, but also go out and explore yourself, listen to some other people that analyze Soraka as well, and then make your own decisions about it. That's really what the channel is all about. It's not about, giving people, just a total recommendation for everything you absolutely have to do in every situation. It's just about showing you some ideas that you can think about critically on your own to make your own decisions, to inform your own gameplay, and to become a better player. So let's go ahead and get in here without any further ado. Okay, so why pick Soraka? Well, she's extremely strong in the right scenario. She's arguably the best support in the game if she's in the right environment. So she can be completely oppressive in a game. And I think we've all had games like this, if you've played League for any length of time, where there's just that Soraka on the enemy team that just feels like you just can't kill her and you can't kill anyone on their team, and it's just very, very frustrating. Or if you've played Soraka a lot, you've probably had games where it just felt like you were just invincible. Like, your team just keeps making terrible decisions, but you just kept healing everybody through it, and you almost single-handedly carried the game as Soraka. And Soraka is one of those supports that can potentially do that. There is a semi-famous person, at least among Soraka lovers out there, named Seb Bernal on the US server, so I'll go ahead and pull him up here. He has a 67% win rate with Soraka after 275 games, and he's currently ranked like 40 on the Challenger ladder. So it's definitely possible to carry a support. So don't listen to those naysayers out there who tell you, oh, you know, support, you can't carry with support, or if you're going to play support, you have to play a heavy AP damage support like Brand or Zyra or, you know, any number of really heavy AP supports. That's just not true. You can win a lot with utility supports. So this guy does it with Soraka, right? Like, that's the most typically thought of as one of the most passive heal, like, utility supports out there. But he does it. Now, I don't do the same build as him. I do sort of a similar build, but he never gets a sight stone, which, you know, is something that I disagree with. I think you should always have a sight stone because it's just so important for getting vision for your team. Now, maybe up in Challenger, I don't know. Maybe you could get away with it. He's obviously gone very far. I mean, he started Platinum, and he was Gold, actually, in Season 6. Probably, I imagine, because he didn't play a lot of games. Maybe he had school or something. I don't know the guy personally. But there just are some seasons where you don't play a lot. I didn't play a lot in Season 5, for example, before I had the channel. But he's clearly doing something right. He's an amazing player. But just as I talked about with my videos, I think you need to take anyone with a grain of salt. And he has some really awesome ideas. But I would personally recommend getting the sight stone. But the moral of the story is here, Soraka can be extremely powerful and carry games, even though she's, you know, thought of as a passive utility support. So, you know, it's okay to pick Soraka. It's okay to pick Janna. I mean, if we look at mine, I'm obviously not a challenger. But Janna, I've got a 58% win rate on after 250 games. Now, I'm only Platinum 2 right now. I was Diamond 5 last season, and I've been as high as Platinum 1 this season so far. It's a long season. We'll get back to Diamond. I'm confident. But you can win a lot with utility supports like Janna, like Soraka, you know, like Nami. These all can win. And Soraka is one in particular who's extremely powerful in the right circumstances. So what are these circumstances? When is Soraka really powerful? Well, I think if you have a lot of tanks on your team and the enemy lacks engage, she's really strong. Her healing potential is through the roof. We'll talk about that with abilities here in a moment. She has a lot of solid harass in lane. I mean, a Soraka lane is almost always going to win. Unless they have super hardcore engage and you miss position a lot, it's almost impossible to lose the Soraka lane. I mean, if your AD carry misses wide open CS constantly, then yes, you can lose it. But she forces a farm off, and she makes it very difficult for the enemy to farm effectively while dodging just all of the Qs you're going to be raining down on them. So I think she's extremely lane dominant, and she's very good later in the game if they don't get on you to kill you. So if you're positioning solid and they don't really have a lot of tools to dive you, she can be very, very strong. So she's pretty strong against other enchanters, and that's just what I'm calling supports because there's so many different kinds of supports. I'm talking about the shielding and healing supports. So I'm talking about she's really good against Janna, Lulu, Nami, and that's a pretty good place to be right now in terms of the current meta because those are, you know, the two best supports right now overall, I think, are Lulu and Janna in that order. But Soraka is very good against both of them. So you could argue, well, Soraka's the best because she's the best against the best, which is a valid argument. So she's definitely up there right now. And I think in 7.9, she just might be the best overall. But we'll see. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But she's certainly an extremely strong support, and in large part because she's very good against the other good supports right now. So her true power increases with ally resistances, and we'll talk about why that is when I talk about the 7.9 in a little bit. But that's why you would pick her, is because she's very good against the other top supports, because she can out-heal them most of the time in late game fights if the enemy doesn't get on you. She has a hard time against engage, so if they have, like, you know, a Leona or a Nautilus or, you know, like a Hecarim, other types of hard engage stuff, she can have a problem. But in just a straight out, just healing gunfight, she's going to out-heal anyone else in the game, most likely. So her overall meta position, if Lulu is picked or banned, she's a good pick. I think that you have to pick Lulu. If Lulu is up and you're at all competent on Lulu, you have to pick her. Not only because she's really strong herself, but you do not want to give the enemy Lulu. If the enemy gets Lulu plus either Kog'Maw or Twitch or Draven in some cases, it's over. Like, it's really, really hard to win that game. It can be done, but it's really, really difficult. So I think you still need to prioritize Lulu if she's up. She's banned most of the time, but if she's up and you feel at all confident on her, you should definitely pick her. And then if the enemy has low team damage, so if they just have a bunch of tanks or just kind of low damage crowd control stuff like Amumu, Sejuani, there's going to be a lot of this in the new patch. So that, keep an eye on that. So if they have low damage, if they have low engage, so just stuff that just kind of wanders around and just wants to fight and really can't get on you that well, then she ends up being very strong. And if your team has multiple tanks, so if you have a lot of tanks that just want to get in there and fight for a really long time, then she can be quite strong. Okay, so let's talk about her basics here really quickly. I've got the Soraka page. Do I have it opened up? Maybe I closed it. We'll go ahead and open it up here. I've got the link in the description. Oh, it's over here. I just sort of... Well, whatever. We'll bring that stuff over here, and we'll talk about these items here in a second. Okay. So what's up with Soraka? What does she do if you're newer to the game? And then how can you utilize her abilities? Which, you know, this might even be useful even if you're somewhat experienced with Soraka. So the first things to note are always base stats. Like, how does this champion interact? She has very slow move speed. So that's number one. So it's really hard to position correctly with her in a lot of situations. You know, a lot of other utility supports will have at least 335, and some of them will have 340 move speed, and most of them have move speed steroids to help them move quickly. Now Soraka does, if she hits people with a Q, then she gets to run faster, I believe, right? Enemy granting rejuvenation. Okay. It slows enemies. I'm sure. Okay, it's 10%. There we go. I don't know why I was zoning out on that. Yes, so she does move faster. If you hit a Q on somebody, it does slow them down by 30%, and it gains you 10% movement speed, which is good. But this is also contingent on you hitting the Q a lot in fights. So you need to be spamming that constantly. We'll talk about that later. So she does have some capabilities of, you know, running around and being faster than her 325 might suggest. But just as sort of a starting base point, 325 is a really low move speed. 30 magic resist, pretty standard. She's a ranged attacker, so she's not going to get more than that. They've thought about buffing that. We'll see in the future. Armor actually is pretty decent compared to some other enchanters. I mean, she's got 23 base armor. I think Janna might have like 22. There are certainly supports that are lower, but it's on the lower end, but it's not obscenely low in terms of her armor. Her mana regen is very high, so she's got almost 12 mana regen. Starting out, which is really, really nice. That means that you can spam your W and your Q. Well, W is not spammable in lane, but you can spam your Q and really not run out of mana early on. It's very difficult to run out of mana, even when you're spamming it. So that's really nice. Some other, you know, popular utility supports, like I think Rakan has 8 mana regen, and Lulu, I believe, also has 8. Janna has 11.5. Sona has 11.5. So there are some that have a lot of regen, but this is really high regen. It's one of the highest regens in the game, so that's really nice for your spells early. And her health is relatively low early on. Her health regen is also extremely low, so you need to land those Qs if you want to regen. Her range is 550, which is really nice. A lot of the other utility supports do not have 550 range. Like I think Janna has 450, something like that. It's really low. Lulu has 550, I believe. But that's pretty good for sneaking in those auto attacks, because most AD carries also have 550. So whenever they go up to auto attack a creep, you can auto attack with her and just stick a little bit of extra damage on them. Now, it's not going to do a ton of damage, but 50 damage over and over again, if you just keep poking them, does add up over time. Okay, so her other abilities. Within 2,500 range, she gets 70% bonus movement speed when moving towards allied champions that are injured. So this is really good. This lets her rotate very quickly, especially when you have mobility boots. You can show up to hot situations and really intervene pretty quickly. So that's quite nice. Also, if you find yourself out of position and there's a low health ally that's sort of far away, then you can run away, although that doesn't happen as much. But it does let you rotate and help out allies quickly. So her rotations themselves are not brutal. You know, she doesn't have a ton of crowd control to just roll up and like completely turn a fight on its head. a lot of times. But that healing, especially kind of in the mid to late game, when you rotate around to try to help that ally who's really far out of position in that 1v1 or whatever in a split lane, then that can make a pretty big difference. So now this is a little bit more advanced, but her abilities don't have they don't cause her to stop moving. So you can actually run away and cast your Qs while you're running, and cast your heals while you're running. So that's kind of advanced, but that's pretty nice overall. So she can move while casting, which is great. Okay, so let's talk about her Q a little bit. This is very underestimated, I think, by a lot of Soraka players, and it was underestimated by me for quite a while. In that I was like, okay, its damage is kind of dinky. You know, Soraka, I just thought of Soraka as just kind of a passive laner. You just level up your heal, just kind of chill in lane, keep people topped off, and you just make it a farm lane. It doesn't have to be that way. You can actually be pretty aggressive with Soraka depending on what the matchup is. Now, if they have a hard engaged champion, you might have to be more careful. But you can actually be pretty aggressive. This is a good rate. I mean, if we look at how much this costs, it's 40 for 70 damage. And if you level it up, I don't recommend leveling it to 5 right away, but if you did, it would be 60 for 230 damage. That's a pretty good rate. I mean, you're only almost getting a 4-to-1 payout on damage to mana cost, and that's very, very competitive. I mean, most spells will only give you like 2-to-1, and some of the really good ones will give you a 3-to-1. But getting a 4-to-1 payout on mana to damage is extremely high. And not only does it do damage, it does area of effect damage without any reduction. So that means you can clear creep waves pretty quickly when you level this up. And it heals you for quite a bit. So you get a buff for 4 seconds, rejuvenation, and it heals you every half a second for this much. So you just multiply this by 8, and that's how much you're healing. So even at level 1, you're going to be healing for 56 overall health, which is a lot. I mean, that's a big heal. And, you know, that's going to be 40 with a 40 AP, 0.4 AP ratio on it, which is pretty decent. So at level 11, you know, it's healing for 88 with a 40 AP ratio, which is pretty good. So that's nice healing. So in lane, you know, if you auto attack, hit someone with a Q auto attack while they're slowed, that's a pretty good harassment tool. They might hit you back once, maybe twice, and you're going to heal back one of those autos over time. So if you can just walk up and attrition people. You just keep autoing, landing Qs, auto Q, and that's really, really annoying to deal with in lane if you're an AD carry. Especially one of those low range AD carries that are very popular right now, like Lucian, like Xayah, when she doesn't have her passive going, is very, very strong. So, you know, she may not be the most brutal, engage, and just completely dominate people in lane, but you can definitely influence the lane heavily if you keep harassing. So that's pretty powerful. It's also only on a 5-second cooldown. So, I mean, it doesn't matter if you miss. Just keep slinging these things at people, because eventually you're going to hit them, and it's going to add up over time. And with this high of a base mana regen and this low of a cost, it only goes up 5 per level, you can really start laying into people. Especially if they don't have warlords, and especially if they don't go for an early Bilgewater. Now, a lot of people do go Blade the Ruined Kings. They can heal through your harass once you start getting to level 5 or 6. But early on, before they get that Bilgewater, and before they, since they don't have warlords a lot of the times, they'll run Fervor instead. Then you, like, you know, levels 1 to 5, you can really start brutalizing people with Soraka and gain a pretty sizable advantage. And it slows people too. So if a jungler's coming in, you know, and you land a couple of these, you land that slow and you just keep running forward, land it again, keep running forward. It's not a permanent slow, but it's a very long, like, you can slow them a lot. So she actually is decent on jungler ganks. Not the most brutal, but she's got some tools in her kit. And you can escape also, because once again, if you hit somebody who's trying to gank you, slow them by 30%, speed you up by 10%. That's pretty good. Okay? And the rejuvenation, so this rejuvenation also applies to allies. So if you hit somebody with your heal, for example, even a level 1 heal, then they're going to heal for 9 per half second. So that's 9 times 8. They're going to get a 72 heal over the course of 4 seconds. That's a double heal. Basically, if you level up your Q, that's a double heal. So you land a Q on somebody, and then you heal your ally. They're going to heal for 152 base without any AP considerations. That's really, really high. So whenever you're healing in lane, you want to try to always land a Q first and then land your W on the ally, just to make sure that you're maximizing that heal. Because if you just use a heal without landing a Q, it's only 80. So it's only roughly half as effective if you have a level 1 heal in lane, which is what I recommend. So that's pretty good. Now, imagine this also. So some people will say, oh, well, why don't you max your W in lane? Well, let's look at what happens if you max your W. If you max W, the cooldown does go down, which is good. I mean, that's unequivocally, that's a good thing, right? But you're only getting 140 heal. So yeah, with your if you have a level 1 Q, you're still going to get a 56 heal. So it's okay, but you're not going to be hurting allies for nearly as much. You're only going to be doing 70 damage instead of 150. And yes, you are getting, 140 total plus the 56 off of this. So 140 plus 56 is 196. But if you had your Q maxed out, then you would deal 150 damage to him instead of 70, so over double damage. And you're going to get that really nice heal for 72. Plus this, that's 152. So it's 40 less healing, but 80 more damage. And this is something spammable that's always relevant in lane, whereas this is only going to be relevant if if your allies are getting really injured. So, maxing your W in lane is okay. The lowered cooldown is great. That's better for an all-in fight and better for like a huge team fight, your W is. But this is just leveling this up is better for wave clear, and it's better for harassment early, and it still is really good with the heal because of the way the Q interacts with your W. So I highly recommend putting 3 points in your Q for laning, and then outside of laning, levels 7 to 10, I highly recommend maxing your W. Your W is also pretty close range. It's only 550, so be careful with that in team fights because that's a lot lower than a Janna shield is 800. A Lulu shield, I believe, is 650. So, you're going to have to be really close to the action, which means enemies are going to be able to hit you with stuff a lot easier. They're going to be able to engage on you. And it just makes positioning a little bit more challenging. So, W is obviously, that's her marquee spell. You want to max this outside of lane. Getting that down to 2 seconds is a really big deal later on in the game. And the heal obviously goes through the roof. So I highly recommend. What does Seb do? Oh, let me see if I can go back and grab Seb really quickly. I'm not sure what he does. Let me see. Okay, I mean, he does max the W in lane. Now, he has some very bizarre runes too, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I don't know if that's matchup dependent or if he does that every time. Okay. So, I mean, you can try it the Seb way if you want. He really seems to like maxing W in lane. Regardless of the situation. So, he's obviously a really good Soraka player, so you can try him out. But personally, and it looks like he uses the same runes every game no matter what. But, he is just one player. He is a great player with Soraka. So, take it with a grain of salt. Use your own theory with it. But I personally have found that having a little bit more harassment in lane with my Q tends to give you a lot more control over the wave, lets you push faster, gives you more harassment, takes some heat off your AD carry, allows them to free farm a little bit better, and still gives you a pretty respectable amount of healing early on. Although, it will make you a little bit weaker in those early game skirmishes around Dragon. Level 7 and 8 is when you're going to start catching up with levels of W. So you're going to be a little behind, but once, in that, level 6 to maybe 6 to 8 range, if you fight over Dragon or a tower or something, you're not going to have as many heals, and the Q is not as good outside of lane. But you're going to catch up pretty quickly, like levels 9 through 10. So you're going to have kind of this moment of weakness, like levels 6 to 8 in terms of team fighting, but you're going to have a much stronger 1 to 5 in most lanes, and then it's going to even out around level 9. It's going to be about what you would normally have anyways. Your final point in W is going to be slightly delayed. It's going to be level 10 instead of level 9. So you're basically, by doing what I'm recommending, which is 3 points in Q in lane, you're shifting your power from levels 6 to 8 down to levels 1 to 5. So you have better early game presence, but a slightly weaker early to mid game, levels 6 to 8. So for that 5 or 6 minutes there, you're going to be a little bit weaker, maybe probably about 5 minutes or so, and then it'll level back off again. So you're just trading some of the power in that 5-minute window to your early, first 8 minutes of laning or so. Okay. So W, very good. You definitely want this maxed out for team fighting in the mid game as soon as you can get it. It's just, like I said, it's debatable whether you want 3 points in Q or not for laning, depending on, and some of that depends on how aggressive your lane is. If you have an Ezreal in your lane and you're just not going to be fighting them a lot early anyways, you might go ahead and start maxing the W in lane. Whereas if you have something like a Draven, you might definitely want these points in Q so that you can just do more damage to them and harass them a bit more in lane. Okay, Equinox is a great 1-point wonder, and you want this on supports. I know a lot of times, we might think, well, that ability's not that good. Why would you max that out? But you want a 1-point wonder because you're not going to be able to get all of your skill points as a support typically. There's going to be one skill that you almost always will have 1 point in. Because you don't start maxing your last skill, I believe, until level 14. So levels 14, 15, and then 17 and 18 is when you're going to finish off your third skill. Because obviously you're going to get your ultimate at level 16. And you're going to max out your first 2 skills at level 13. And most games typically will end around you'll be level 14. Especially if you go into higher elos, you're going to be lower and lower level because teams will close out games faster. So you really just can't put more than 1 or 2 points typically in one of your spells. So it's really nice to have a spell that's good. It's just 1 point, it's solid. You don't need more points in it. So Janna has her Tornado with Q. Then her E is, and that's kind of your 1-point wonder, is what I call it on the document here. And that just means 1 point. It's really, really good for 1 point, but it just kind of falls off a lot later with more points in it. It's just not nearly as useful as the other spells, and that's fine. It doesn't need to be because you're not going to level it. So just having that thing that's 1 point is good. And sometimes it can be complicated if there's a champion that has 3 really good abilities and you want to level all of them. So for example, Lulu. Like her Q is really nice if you get it early for wave clear, but then you also want her shield, her E, for team fighting later, and you definitely want her W for team fighting. That's the most powerful thing in her kit. So all of her abilities are good. So it's really hard to figure out which one you only want to put 1 point in early on. But it's easy with Soraka. It should always be your E is the last thing that you max. It's a great 1-point wonder. The range is 925. You're almost never going to root people with this. Like sometimes, maybe if you're chaining it with other crowd control, like if there's a Vi or something, you might be able to root them. But most of the time, you're just going to cast this on people to stop them from flashing or to stop them from channeling an ability. But it doesn't slow them or hold them in place in any way unless they stand there for like a full 1.5 seconds. And you get a longer root duration, which is nice. The damage doesn't matter that much. The cooldown reduction is nice, but it's still, you're only going to cast this once per fight, most likely. So it's great as a 1-point way to stop channeling, to stop people from flashing, and it has lots of good utility, but this frees you up to max your W and your Q later on. So I think that's quite powerful. I have heard people say, well, you should max this second. I don't recommend that, but you can. I think that Q and W are both much, much more powerful if you max those. So this is definitely your first max, 100%. It's just, like I said, debatable about your first 3 points in Q. And this, you should get at 1 point, probably level 4, maybe level 3 if you really want it. But I typically would go Q, W, Q, and then get a point in E. Then get that last point that you want in Q, and then start maxing out your W up to level 10. Okay, so it does have some good uses. It's got the silence. It's good for stopping flashes, like I said. Good for shutting off channeling, like a Katarina, Xerath, anything like that that wants to channel. Now, one good thing about this is it's not targeted, and it just puts a zone on the floor. So you can actually preemptively cast this and make sure that it's going to silent people. So the best use of this is probably Zhonya's Hourglass. So if that Fizz Zhonya's, sometimes his E, Playful Trickster, might come off a cooldown right when Zhonya's finishes. And so it's just kind of a race to who can press their ability first. If it's a point-click ability, typically, is it like, can Fizz get on his Trident first? Or can, you hit him with something first? Well, with E, you're 100% going to get priority. You just put the E on him early, and then he's going to wake up out of that and immediately get silenced and probably stuns. That would be an instance where you could hit him with a stun. Or if someone's teleporting in, You know, you can make sure that as soon as they teleport, they can't use their movement ability. You just put it on them first. They show up, silent, stunned, boom. So those are two places where having that silence be an AoE field is good. Also, it can silence multiple people, obviously. If they get pulled in by an Oriana ball and you put this on them, then everyone's going to be silenced. So, or if you can anticipate, like, Annie trying to flash in and Tibbers, that's one of the best feelings in the world. Or like an Alistar trying to flash WQ combo, and you silence them right where they flash. If you can anticipate that and silence early and they flash on top of it, that just completely ruins their day, and it's hilarious. So it's hard to do that, but it can be quite powerful. So it is a very versatile ability. I don't think it's as good as some of the other crowd controls that other enchanters bring, like Lulu's Polymorph, for example. I think in many situations it's much stronger than this, but this is still very good in the right circumstances. Okay, how are we looking on time here? All right, we'll move it along. And finally, the R is pretty powerful. She heals everyone on the map, including untargetable allies, so including people that are in Azonias, and other such states, and herself. So she heals everybody, and the healing is increased by 50% at targets below 40% of their maximum health. So that can be a very, very large heal. And it's global, so you can heal from the bottom lane, and it'll heal people in the top lane. Now, just make sure that you're going to get, like, it's going to turn a fight. Like, don't use this just to grab the assist on the top lane if you know they're already going to kill him. The cooldown is very long. It's 160 seconds. And if this is on cooldown and the enemies know it, which they will, because they'll hear it, then they'll know they can all in and fight you, and you're not going to have this. So, you want to save this for really, really important fights. And don't use it if you're about to contest Dragon or Baron. Don't use it, you know, on that one guy that gets caught out that's 100% dead. Save it, and then just regroup and use it later in a team fight. 'Cause it's an extremely powerful team fighting tool. So you want to make sure that you have this up most of the time. So I know sometimes it's tempting just to throw it just to get an assist on a fight that's going on somewhere on the map. But don't do that. Save it for really impactful situations. And just be aware that Morellonomicon and Executioner's Calling will reduce the healing. However, you know, you do get 50% bonus healing if they're below. So that kind of equals out in some sense if they're below 40% health. So just be aware that that is a thing, but you do get a bonus below 40. So try to use it when people are below 40, but they're not going to get spiked out and killed before it goes off. It is basically, it's almost instant cast. It has a very small animation. But it's great. Okay, so Soraka's overall strengths are excellent team fighting. She can seem almost unstoppable in team fights. If they don't get on you and you have your maxed out W and you have Redemption plus Wind Speakers, it's really, really hard to kill you, especially once you get a locket. Just forget it. You're not going to kill the Soraka. You're not going to kill the person the Soraka is trying to kill most of the time. I mean, maybe if they have Executioners, you know, that can be a problem. But she has excellent early game presence, so she gives out a free lane pretty much. You just spam Qs, W, heal your ally, and unless they have a really hard engaged champion, it's really hard to outlast a Soraka in lane. She's very, very oppressive in lane. She has excellent matchup against other enchanters, so she's great against Lulu, great against Janna. She scales really well into the late game because she's going to out-heal them late game, and yeah, and they don't have any kind of real engage to get on her. Now, Lulu's a little tougher to deal with because she can W her allies to help them get on you faster, so she can put the W on that Hecarim to run into you. But Janna is a classic person who suffers against Soraka. So Soraka is a classic counter to Janna, I should say. Because Janna has nothing that can get on you, and you're just going to out-heal her most of the time. Now, one thing to note about Lulu and Soraka, though, is their shields are not affected by grievous wounds. So that's one thing. We'll talk about weaknesses. Right here is that Morellonomicon and Mortal Reminder heavily hurt Soraka, and they don't hurt Janna or Lulu. So if you look at Morellonomicon, if they deal enough damage to put your allies below 35%, then it puts grievous wounds on them for 8 seconds. That includes area of effect damage. So, you know, if a Ziggs hits all of your allies and knocks out 60% of their health with his bomb, or 65% of the health with his bomb, then it's going to put that healing debuff on you. Mortal Reminder, in some ways, is even worse because it's any physical damage. They don't even have to put you below a certain health threshold. Any damage they deal is going to cut your healing in half. So this is a brutal counter against Soraka, and this is part of why it's more rare to see her in high elos. I mean, obviously Seb works around it, but this is probably why you don't see her as much in high elo streams, is because smart players at higher elos will get this item, because Executioners is very cheap. It's only 800 gold. It still has 15 attack damage on it, so that's let's see, I think attack damage is worth 35. Yeah, so I mean, they're really only paying like 275 gold to hard counter Soraka, because they're still getting decent AD, and they can build it into a good item later on in the game that's great against other tanks also. So they're really not going that far out of their way to get an Executioners in lane. So smart people will get an Executioners against Soraka, and that's a big problem. So that's one of her major weaknesses, is that as you get to higher elos and people are smarter about itemization, that can be a problem. But if they don't get it, you know, she has awesome scaling with her plus healing, and if your allies have resistances, very powerful. She has a great matchup, like I said, against Lulu and Janna for the most part, Nami, Sona, anything like that. She's going to be great against them. She's really, really good with Redemption and Locket, and she has that global influence with her ult, like a true global. So that's very, very powerful. So her weaknesses, as I just described, she's weak to engage champions and assassins. So if they have things like Fizz or Kassadin or LeBlanc, Hecarim, Echo, I mean, all of these champions are somewhat popular, and they're very good against Soraka because they can just get in there and get on her pretty safely. So she has a hard time against very high mobility, high damage champions. She has very limited crowd control, so she really can't stop that Kassadin from getting on her and murdering her. I mean, she can silence, but he can walk out of it and then just keep going. So unless your team has some decent peel for you, it's going to be very, very hard to stay alive in that situation. She has very limited escapes. So, yeah, like I said, if you get caught out, you know, your best option is just going to be to try to Q them and run away. But that's difficult a lot of times to get away, because they'll either flash your Q or they'll dash around it or something, and you're just going to get run down and killed. So she's a lot more dangerous than Lulu, and certainly than Janna, when it comes to warding, rotating, if you get caught out. So has hard problems with Massive Burst, which I talked about, and she has a hard time with Morello and Mortal. So she can be oppressively powerful, or it can just sometimes feel like there's very little you can do against really fed assassin type of champions. So her overall matchups, I think that she's good with Vayne, Xayah, Draven, Kate, Gragas, Mundo. So just like super tank, she's pretty good with. She's good with Caitlyn. Caitlyn's good with almost anybody. You can just push the lane, dominate early. She's great with Draven for similar reasons. She's good with Xayah for similar reasons. It could be a decent combo if Xayah gets her root on somebody and then you put a silence on them. That can be pretty brutal. With Vayne, you can just kind of babysit Vayne and heal her up in lane and just make sure she's not going to lose. I don't think that Vayne is particularly good right now in the current meta. We'll see in the next patch. But she is good with those types of difficult early game champions. So like Twitch, she'd probably be all right with Twitch too. She's good against Janna, Lulu, Rakan, as long as he doesn't W you. It can be pretty good against that. And then Lee Sin. Champions like that need to dive in, and if that silence is just going to absolutely wreck them, it's going to mess up their combo, then she can be pretty good against that. Like a Riven or something, she's decent against Riven. So she's not great with champions that have like heavy burst or are very sort of combo reliant. So like Jhin, Misfortune, Ashe, Varus. She's not great with these champions because she doesn't provide a lot of peel. They're already pretty lane dominant. And you know, you'd be better off probably picking a champion that can also be lane dominant with them. So, you know, I think that there are probably better choices there. Although she's okay with them, it's not like she's awful. I mean, she's pretty good with anybody in lane, but she's just going to be a lot better as either a babysitter or a pusher. So she's not great against divers like Hecarim via Nautilus or assassins like LeBlanc or Kassadin. Recommended items as of 7.8, Mobility Boots, Redemption Locket, Ruby Sightstone, Ardent Sensor. They're just very standard builds. You know, the big three items are Redemption Locket and Ardent. I recommend Ruby Sightstone. and I recommend mobility boots. There are other options to some extent, although I think you should heavily go for these items. There are some people that will get Eye of the Oasis. I explain this in depth in my itemization video and in my warding video. I do not recommend that item. It has dead stats later on in the game. It gives you healing and mana regen, which is okay, but that's not going to keep you alive in a long fight. Ruby Sightstone, it's going to keep you alive, and it's going to have a better interaction with Redemption and Locket later on in the game. Oasis gives you some gold earlier, but it's better to get that Redemption, 6 or 7 minutes earlier and turn a team fight, because if you just cause one more person to die on the enemy team from Redemption, or you save one ally, that's 450 gold, and that's going to be way more valuable than the passive gold that you would get off of Eye of the Oasis. In fact, it's going to give you about 17 minutes of Eye of the Oasis. So that means if you cause one death, or you save one ally within that 6-minute window when you get Redemption faster, then that's going to be as though you had a Eye of the Oasis ticking for an additional 17 minutes. So I would much rather have that power earlier, and that's not even including multiple kills, multiple assists, getting a dragon after a kill, or getting a tower after a kill. I mean, you want combat stats. You want to actually influence the game and win fights and do stuff on the map, and passive gold just doesn't do that for you. And so I am a major advocate for rushing Redemption and not upgrading your coin item, which you get early on. Once again, this is probably going to change in 7.9 with the introduction of some of the items we'll talk about, but as of 7.8, that's my recommendation. And I know it's controversial. This is probably something that people don't agree with me a lot, but if you want to hear, more about that, just check out my itemization video. Here, I'll just put a link to it since I've mentioned it so many times. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll put the link in here. I'm not going to go through it right now. I'll put the link in there so you'll see it in the Google Doc when you're watching, or when you, if you go into the Google Doc and watch, you can find the link. I'll put it right here. It'll say something like itemization video about Eye of the Oasis, and then Vision Domination section about Eye of the Oasis. I have 2 sections in each one of those videos, or 1 section in each video that's about 15 minutes long, where I break down in depth why pros and challenger players get Eye of the Oasis and why you shouldn't if you're lower than Diamond. So if you're interested in that idea, it's one of the most controversial stances that I take, but I back it up with a lot of math, a lot of reasoning. Just go in, check that out. I'll have it linked right here in the items. You won't see it now because it's going to take me 5 minutes to do that, and I don't want to waste time in the video doing that. But it's basically the reasons that I just described. Just rushing Redemption is much better at lower elos. Anything that is low diamond or lower, you need to rush Redemption as of patch 7.8. Might change in the future, but 7.8 is what you should do. We'll talk about what that's going to change into in the future here in like 2 minutes. Okay, so then the runes, I recommend armor, flat health, CDR, 2 move speed quints, and an armor quint. There's definitely an argument where you could go for 3 armor quints. If you really want to, you can go for, AP here. AP is okay on Soraka. She gets 60% on her W here. It doesn't affect your damage that much. That's a really low percentage. You do get a 0.4 here, though, with this portion of the healing. So that's pretty good right there. And then, of course, on her ult, you get a 55. But that 55 can be 50% more based on this. So that really ends up being like a 0.7 or higher. So she is pretty good with AP early on. So maybe if you're against a pushover lane, you're against a Janna or something, and you want to go with that flat AP, you could run the flat AP on her, and that would give you some more damage on your Q. It would help you heal up a little bit better, and it would make your own heals a little bit more efficient. So it's up to you. Personally, I err on the side of survivability most of the time. I want that armor. I want that move speed so that I don't get caught as often when I'm trying to ward. But you definitely could go flat AP here if you want to. That's a very viable option. You could also go 3 armor right here. If you're against a heavy AP champion like a Zyra or a Brand, you could definitely substitute in magic resist right here for the CDR. Soraka doesn't necessarily need a ton of CDR. This is already on a low cooldown. This is a pretty low cooldown. This you're only going to do once per fight, but it's really, really nice for her ultimate to have that. So I tend to like the CDR. Those are also very expensive. They're like 820 IP a piece. So if you're new to the game, just go with the magic resist. I think they're like 200 IP a piece. it's still pretty good. So magic resist is fine, but she does have a lot of flexibility with her runes, just depending on what you're against and what you need to do. I think armor is almost always a must in the red slot. HP runes are also about 810 a pop, so if you can't afford those, just go for the flat armor. I think those are like somewhere between 200 to 400 a piece. I think they're like 200 a piece. So that's a really good bargain. So you could just do, if you're kind of on a budget, you could definitely just do 9 armor here, 9 armor here, 9 magic resist here, and then 3 armor on your quints, and that would be perfectly fine and viable. So if you're on a budget, you're new to the game, you like Soraka, she's very cheap, she's only 450 IP, or maybe you just, sometimes when you get autofilled as support, you just need something you can play that's really cheap, and you want to spend the rest of your IP on your main role, like your mid lane or your jungle. Just go for Soraka, which is all armor, basically, and magic resist in the blues. That's very cheap combination for everything. It's a really good bargain if you just want to be able to play one support when you get autofilled. So, wind speakers is always a must. Her masteries are not negotiable. It is always wind speakers, 100%. Don't ever take, anything like Thunderlords or anything else. It's always wind speakers. It's a super powerful mastery on her. So yeah. Okay, so let's talk about my 7.9 predictions. So in 7.9, a lot of stuff's going to change, and I think Soraka is going to be extremely powerful in 7.9. A lot of people are saying, they're asking me, well, are tanks coming back? Are tanks going to be really good? Well, in other positions, yes. And the support role, I don't think so. And I've got a few reasons here. I think Soraka's coming back, though. I mean, she never really left. She still has been really good the entire time. But she's definitely going to be, I think, back into the must-pick or must-ban, potentially in 7.9. Or at the very least, moving up quite a bit in priority. And there's several reasons for that. Okay, number one, I think utility supports overall are going to be through the roof powerful. They already are. But they're going to get even more powerful. And the reason is because of resistances and how resistances work. So I've explained this in my itemization video, but I'll go through it again here. So take that link up here where I talk about Eye of the Oasis if you want more details about this. But I'm going to go through it just really quick for you right here. Each 1 point of armor equals 1% more effective health against AD. So every 1 armor that you have forces an enemy to do 1% more of that damage type to kill you. The same is true of magic resist as well as armor. So for example, if you have 1000 HP with no armor, it's going to take 1000 physical damage to kill you. If you have 1000 HP with 100 armor, it's going to take 2000 physical damage to kill you. The mathematical formula for this is, I believe you do 100 divided by 100 plus your armor amount, and you multiply that times whatever the damage is. So for example, let's say if we have pull up old calculator here. Let's say we have, what did I use here? 100 armor in this example. Let's say you have, 100 divided by 200, which is, 100 base plus 100 armor. That's 200. 100 divided by 200 is 0.5. So let's say they do 1000 damage to you times 1000. They're only actually going to do 500 damage to you. So it's going to take 2,000 because you would do, what would it take to actually kill you? 2,000 times 0.5 equals 1,000 to kill you. So it's the same thing. It's just, that's a little bit more math that, is a little bit more difficult conceptually to understand, but it's the same math. That's how it actually works. They talk about that in the League Wikia. But just the easiest way to think of it is you are 1% harder to kill for that type of damage for every 1 armor that you have or 1 magic damage that you have for magic damage respectively. That's the easiest way to think of it. And that is always true. There are no diminishing returns. So if you have 300 armor, it's going to take 300% more of that type of damage to kill you. If you have 20 armor, it's going to take 20% more of that type of damage to kill you. So that never changes, okay, in terms of how that statement works, okay? So shields and healing scale with resistances. So if you put a shield on somebody, it takes the armor affects the shield. So if you put, so for example, if Janna shields you for 300 and you have 100 armor, it's going to take 600 physical damage to break that shield. If Nami heals you for 200 and you have 100 armor, it's going to take 400 physical damage to cut through that healing that she just gave you. For example, if Soraka is the same thing. If Soraka heals you for 200, it's going to take, and you have 100 armor, it's going to take 400 physical damage to negate that 200 healing that you just did. On the other side, if Zyra deals 300 damage to you, or 300 damage to an enemy, and they have 100 magic resist, the enemy's actually only going to take 150 damage. So healing and shielding scale much better than damage based on resistances. So in many ways, it's 4 times as effective in a lot of situations to have shielding and healing than it is to have damage. So assume that everyone has 100 magic resist. It's going to take 1,000 damage to break a 500 shield. However, 500 damage from an ally to an enemy that has that shield is only going to deal 250. So thus, shields can be up to 4 times as effective as damage. This is why it can be so frustrating and try to cut through a mega tank that has healing and shielding and regeneration on them, is because just the shielding scales much harder than the damage in some metas. Now, lately it doesn't, because they have, they have ways to nerf the healing. That's why they have things like Morellonomicon and Mortal Reminder. And they have nerfed a lot of the champions that do that over time, because it's really oppressive when that's a very powerful meta, like Mundo, for example. But that might all change in patch 7.9, and here's why a lot of that's going to change, and here's why there's going to be more resistances, and Soraka might be better than ever. So, we've got, first of all, we've got the changes to the Rift Herald. So one of the big problems with Soraka is she's very vulnerable to ganks, because she doesn't have a lot of really good escapes, and she tends to push lanes because her Q is really good at pushing lanes. If you put that on caster minions, you can definitely push people into tower. But if they come around and flank behind you, Soraka is very susceptible. She doesn't have a lot of crowd control. She doesn't have a lot of escapes. She has a low movement speed. It's just really rough if you get flanked when you're Soraka. So that's part of what's challenging right now as of 7.8 with Soraka, is that everyone wants to go bottom lane. A lot of very smart junglers are just going to sit on the bottom lane for several reasons. Number one, dragons are very powerful. So if they kill you bottom lane, then they have a much higher chance of getting the dragon. Also, if you kill the bottom lane, you're potentially getting 2 kills. So if you have a successful gank, then you're not only going to get 1 kill, you're probably going to get 2. And so that's a bigger reward for bottom lane. And bottom lane has much lower armor on their towers initially, so it makes it much easier to kill the bottom lane. That's why lane switching stopped last season, is because they put an extra shielding on the top lane to discourage people from switching lanes. But Rift Herald might change this. Now, it depends on what these numbers are and how good this item is, but this might make people at least consider going top lane, because right now Rift Herald kind of sucks. The old Rift Herald as of 7.8. Like, you get a very minor buff, which is good, but it takes a very long time to hack down that Rift Herald, and overall, it's just not going to be as impactful as a dragon or getting a first tower bot lane is, or even 2 kills for that matter a lot of the time. So if people are going top to try to get that Rift Herald, then that means that they're not going to be going bottom as much, obviously. So, now you might actually be able to push in with Soraka and not have to worry about the jungler ganking you nearly as much. So that can be really powerful. Also, her ultimate being able to influence fights top lane to determine who gets that Rift Herald, if your top laner and jungler are fighting their top laner and jungler, can be another really important interaction. So I think that the Rift Herald alleviating the gank pressure and Soraka's ability at level 6 to influence fights in the top lane can be very, very powerful because of the new Rift Herald and just how fast that item might actually be able to help take towers top lane. So that's one thing that's really good. Also, the new coin item, I think, is going to be the best quest item. Now, I don't have it pulled up here. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in the PD, and I'm just sitting on the new items. But right now, the current quest for the coin is whenever you collect a certain amount of gold, when you level up to the tier 2 coin item, you get an item that you can use to cash in to get an extra skill point. So it doesn't give you an extra level, and you still have a certain amount of max skill points, but it does speed you up in terms of progression. And that skill point, I believe, is going to be the best quest item. Getting an extra skill point is a huge deal. I mean, that lets you level up your W faster. That's going to be the big one, because you're probably going to complete the gold quest, I would imagine, in the mid-game, you know, probably around level 8 or 9, and that's going to let you catch up and get that W a lot faster. So I think that's going to be very powerful. So it's going to be really good on Soraka. It's going to be really good on Lulu. All of these enchanter supports. It's going to be really nice. And I believe, based on what I've seen on the forums, you can still sell the gold item early on if you need to. So you can sell it without upgrading to Eye of the Oasis, and you can sell it without upgrading to Talisman of Ascension if you want to. I think Talisman's going to be really good also, which we'll talk about here in a second. But you do have the option with the coin item to get your extra skill point, level it up, and then sell the gold item and still benefit from that skill point. Whereas with the other ones, from what I understand, they give you a slow on Relic Shield, and they speed you up a little bit with the Spell Thief's Edge one. But you have to keep the item to do that, so you can't sell those items. You have to keep it to get the effect. With the coin, you can sell the coin, which is huge because there's going to be very, very powerful items, especially for Soraka, potentially, on the new patch. So being able to get that skill point, sell the item, and move on to bigger and better things rather than having to upgrade to Eye of the Oasis Eye of the Watchers or Eye of the Equinox is going to be very powerful. So I think that's good. Now, speaking of Talisman, though, I'll go ahead and pull that up. If you do want to go ahead and go for the full upgrade on Talisman, I think that's going to be the best sort of top-end coin item, or top-end gold item. I think it's much better than Frost Queens. I think it's much better than Face of the Mountain. And the reason is it can dramatically influence fights because it gives people a ton of move speed and synergizes very well with Ruby Sightstone. Also, they've upgraded this to be 200 move speed around towers. I haven't seen a lot of people talking about that, but that seems ridiculous. What? Builds up to 200% move speed around towers. Or fallen towers, too. Now, if you didn't play during the ZZ Rot days of last season, when I played ZZ all the time and I was talking about why ZZ Rot was so good, part of the reason, well, it gave a lot of lane pressure, first of all, which was really good. But another major reason is you got Point Runner, which is that passive that gives you movement speed around towers. That is extremely nice because it's even fallen towers. So if you think, okay, well, I just went back and bought, and I need to get back out here and leave some wards. Well, look what's on the way to warding. A bunch of towers. So you can just run it straight up middle lane. You'll get a ton of movement speed, and then you can get in there and ward these towers. Or let's say you need to rotate. Let's say that, you know, someone down here is having a fight, and you're trying to run down lane to get to them. It just allows you to run very quickly to get to where you need to be, or to retreat. You know, let's say it's your team has a terrible fight here in the mid lane, and you just need to retreat and get back to your inhibitor. Maybe these towers are fallen, and you need to defend base. You can just run all the way back up here. Or, you know, now this is more valuable on tanks, but if you're diving, or let's say your team's diving or whatever, doing something ridiculous, you need to go in here and try to save them. Let's say instead of taking this tower, they're diving base, stuff starts going south, you can run back out pretty quickly. Or maybe you need to tank a couple of tower shots, you run in here, heal a couple of people, and then run back out. Having 200% movement speed around towers is pretty insane. It also gives you some survivability with the 45 armor, nice cooldown reduction. Base health regen is kind of whatever, it's okay. But that movement speed is pretty massive. I mean, giving everyone 40% movement speed for 3 seconds on a 60-second cooldown really lets you engage very well, and it really lets you disengage very well if you need to. So I think that could potentially be quite strong, especially in a tank kind of meta. So that is on the table for Soraka. She's one of the best users of coin and of this speed up because, once again, she doesn't have a lot of great escapes. So this does let you get away from dangerous situations. And it gives you that little bit of extra engage, which Soraka lacks. So I tried this out even on 7.8 in a game where the enemy had a Lulu Cog, I believe. And we were going to get outscaled and have a really hard time in that game. But because I got Talisman pretty quickly, I was able to boost in our Zhen Zhao and Nasus to get on that Kog'Maw very quickly to kill him. And so Talisman, I think, almost single-handedly won us that game because we had a bunch of bruisers that were good against Kog'Maw, but they could have been kited pretty easily otherwise. So Talisman is quite powerful. It's good with coin. This might benefit Soraka. So Soraka is arguably the best coin user in the game to begin with. And the fact that she can sell it and get the benefit if she wants to, or the fact that she can get Talisman, which is going to be one of the best tier 3 gold items in the game. All of this is very good news for Soraka. Okay, speaking of overpowered, let's look at Gargoyle Plate if you haven't done this yet. This item has to get nerfed. Like, there's just no way this item goes through as is. I mean, look at this thing. Okay, it's only 250 or 2,500 gold, so that's really competitive. It has Guardian Angel stuff to it. Now you get 40 armor and 40 magic resist. Which is okay, that's not great. However, if you're near 3+ enemy champions, it gives you bonus 40 armor and 40 magic resist. So, you know, that total value then in a team fight is going to be 80 times 20. That's what armor's worth. So that's 1,600 plus 18 times 80. That right there makes it very valuable. It's 3,000. But the crazy thing is, you can use the active. It gives you 40% extra health. It basically heals you back by 40%. But the important thing to note here, Grievous Wounds does not affect this. We'll talk about that in a second. It's an infusion of health. It does not say heal. It says increases health, just like Lulu's ultimate. So Grievous Wounds and Morellonomicon are not going to affect this item. So it reduces your damage by 60%. Who cares if you're Soraka? And if there's 3 or more people around you, if it's Stone Skin, 100%. So it full heals you. You could have 100 health and then boost right back up to 3,000 off of this on a single click. And it's only on a 90-second cooldown. So you're going to have this up virtually every team fight. So that means even if they focus you out of Soraka, you can use this to boost yourself, heal yourself almost all the way back up. The same is true of allies, and that's why I say that this is really good for Soraka, because remember, Soraka wants slow, steady damage that's predictable that she can heal through. So this is basically going to give the mega tanks double health in many instances. So, you know, that 4,000 health, well, 4,000 is very ambitious. Let's just say 3,000 health in the mid-game bruiser that you have. This is going to give them an effective 6,000 health that you can heal through. So this item is going to be really, really strong, because it's going to get, like, the enemy's just going to run out of juice at some point. If Soraka's healing them all the way down, and then if they do manage to almost kill them, they pop Gargoyle Plate and Soraka just keeps healing them. It'll be extremely difficult to cut through all of that. So I think that's really, really nice for Soraka. Guardian Angel is another one. So they're changing Guardian Angel to make this basically a must-buy on anything that deals 80 damage. Like, why? I don't know. It'll be an interesting meta, but people are going to get very annoyed because of the interaction between Gargoyle Plate and Guardian Angel. I mean, you're basically going to have to kill everybody like 3 times to actually kill them. So that Olaf that's running into your team that's got, you know, 3,000 health, you're going to have to basically kill him once, and then he's going to Gargoyle Plate to heal up. And then if you kill him again, then he's going to have Guardian Angel. And then by the time you actually kill him again, his Gargoyle Plate might be up, because it might almost literally take you 90 seconds to hack through him, especially if a Soraka is healing him. So you get 40 damage on it, which is nice. I mean, that's respectable. I mean, that almost makes it worth itself right there. Let's see. So AD technically is worth 35 gold each times 40. That's 1,400. So you're getting 1,400 damage right there, and then 30 armor is going to be another 600. So that's 2,000 in stats. So you're only paying 400 gold, really, to get the Guardian Angel passive, which is crazy. I mean, so even if you only have, you know, 2,000 health, if you're just like a lowly little 80 carry or something, getting an extra 1,000 health, you know, is roughly equivalent to what, 2,600? Because each health is worth 2.66 gold. So 2,660 plus 2,000. I mean, the item's almost double in value right there. So That's pretty insane. That, you know, you're gonna get what, 100 and let me see. You're getting 194% value out of this, even on a 2,000 health target. That's not even including like an Olaf that's gonna get 1,500 extra health out of it. So if it is like a 3,000 health Olaf, you get with that, you're getting like basically a 250% cost efficiency on there. I mean, that's ridiculous. So when people are healing up from Guardian Angel, which once again is not reduced by Grievous Wounds or Mortal Reminder because you just wake up with that much health after you die, that makes Soraka even more powerful, because now, like, one problem with Soraka is if people get spiked out, so they just get literally one-shotted by the Cassid, and before you can heal them or do anything about it, they're just blown up, especially squishy targets. But now that they can all have Guardian Angel, as soon as they wake up, you can heal them up more. Once all of those cooldowns are down, you know, once, this is going to be especially brutal for all-end champions that really rely very heavily on their cooldowns. So Lux, for example, she full combos, blows somebody up, or Veigar full combos, blows somebody up. They have Guardian Angel. They wake up with their health. Soraka heals them back up. They all of a sudden don't have their cooldowns anymore. So Soraka is very, very good in that environment because that takes away one of the scenarios that she's weak in, which is really heavy burst assassins. Not to mention, in theory, you could put this on Soraka. I don't recommend Guardian Angel on Soraka. It's okay because she's not going to benefit from the attack damage. But Gargoyle Plate would be excellent on her because she wants to team fight anyways, and just being able to heal up that much is pretty crazy. So I think that that's really solid. Now, Mortal Reminder is also going to take a huge hit. So remember, Grievous Wounds is going to... her Gargoyle Plate is going to bypass Grievous Wounds. Gargoyle is going to bypass... or Guardian's going to bypass Grievous Wounds. And on Mortal Reminder itself, there's 22% less armor shred, so it's going to make it a much less appealing item in 7.9. If we look at Mortal Reminder, yeah, so they did lower the cost, which is, you know, okay, but it's doing 27% less armor shred, so it's going to be a lot less valuable against tanks. So you still want to get it. Now, I was talking about how huge of a deal that was to buff the component of Mortal Reminder to make it more armor-piercing friendly, but no one ever really talked or utilized that. But that could have been really powerful in the last couple of metas. But anyways, they're lowering the completed Mortal Reminder down to 35%. So that's a lot less appealing overall. So, yeah, people might still get this for the Grievous Wounds, but that's going to make them a lot weaker against tanks, particularly tanks that have shields, or tanks that are going to use Gargoyle Plate or Guardian Angel. And this is still going to be a bad item against other 80 carries. So, we'll see. People will still get this against you, but at least it's going to hurt them in other matchups. So, they're going to have to sacrifice a lot more if they want to counter you, which is good. And one of the really... things that I don't see a lot of people talking about, which could really put Soraka over the top, is a massive buff to Warmogs, at least right now on the PvE. Now, remember, all of this is subject to change. Like, Gargoyle Plate is almost certainly going to get nerfed at some point. This 200% is probably going to get nerfed. Like, some of this is going to change, but some of it's going to go through. I mean, they've justified why they think this is a good idea on Guardian Angel. I don't think it's a good idea, but they've justified it. So, that's probably going to stay. So, a lot of this is probably going to stay, but some of it might get nerfed. But it's all good. This is all good for Soraka. So this is why. So even if they revert some of these changes, there's still going to be, you know, half a dozen other reasons that Soraka is going to be strong. So if we look at Warmogs as a new item, like, this is crazy. So it's only $27.50 to activate. This is massive. This is so huge for Soraka, because this item is obviously really good on her. I mean, some people say, oh, well, you don't want to get flat health on Soraka because it uses 10% of her health every time, and that doesn't matter if she has 2,000 health or 20,000 health. It's still taking the same percentage. That's true, but you have to keep in mind that that's only if you use all of your health all the way down to 0 all the time without ever getting touched, that it's not going to benefit you. When in reality, in actual fights, you're going to get hit. People are going to be going for you, and health actually helps you survive. I know it's a novel idea. But anytime someone says health is not good on Soraka, I'm just like, What? Yeah, it doesn't benefit your healing directly, but it keeps you alive. You can't do any healing if you're dead. And a lot of the times you're running a lot as Soraka, or you're getting beat up by people that are trying to dive you. And having that extra survivability with the health is good. So yeah, are other kinds of resistances good? Yeah, magic resistant armor are very good on Soraka. But that doesn't mean that health is awful on her. Health is, in fact, quite good on Soraka, even though it doesn't, have a ton of synergy with her W. It just flat out keeps you alive against both types. So if they have mixed damage, if they have, an AD carry that's super fed, and they have a Fizz that's going AP that's super fed, or a Cassidon, then health is probably one of the best stats because it protects against both of them. But the real awesome thing about Warmogs is obviously the regeneration portion of it, and this is getting some massive buffs. So that 2750 threshold is very, very important. Like, it doesn't sound like much. That's only 250 different from 3000, but this is massive. You're going to be able to get this active going probably at least 3 to 5 minutes faster, and it's going to be so much more friendly for your itemization. So, and a lot of it just comes down to the math, because that's very close to a very common threshold. So you're going to have 2 items, a total of 3 items, I suppose, and that's going to help you reach your threshold. So first of all, your base, and I'm just looking at, I looked at level 9, I believe. Let me see up here. Was it level 9 or was it level 11? Health is 1055. Okay, I looked at level 11 because that's when you could reasonably buy this item. It's like a third item, potentially. So your base health is going to be 1213. Off of Redemption, you're going to get 300 health. Off of Ruby Sightstone, you're going to get 500 health. And then off of Warmogs itself, you're going to get 800 health. So the total there is 2813. So this is conspicuously lower than 3000, which is what it is currently. So that means that you would have to buy another Ruby Crystal, which is another 400 gold, before you could actually buy this item. And that 400 gold's not going to build into anything that you really want, because you already have Redemption, you already have Ruby Sightstone, and you already have Warmogs. What are you going to do with that? You can get like a Kindle Gem and try to get like a Spirit Visage or something, which is okay, but it's not optimal. And that takes up an extra slot in your inventory. I mean, by this time, you're already going to have these 3 items taking up slots. You're going to have Boots, which is going to take up another slot. You're going to have to get Control Wards, which is another slot. And you're going to want to start building things like Locket. Just trust me, it is a pest to have to get that extra Ruby Crystal right now if you want to try the Warmogs out. Which is a good item right now on her. But it's just really annoying to try to get to that 3000 threshold. So, you would have to run Redemption here, or not Redemption. You'd have to get a Ruby Crystal right now. As of 7.8, you'd have to get a Ruby Crystal, and you would have to get like flat HP runes, which is what I recommend anyways. But if you're poor and you want to run the armor ones in yellow, that could be a big deal. So close doesn't count. I mean, right now this would only be 2963. It would not trigger it. Like, you would need 1 more level, or you would need to run those flat runes. However, this is perfect, because now in 7.9 they're lowering the threshold to 2750. So this is excellent. So now you can build the items that you should be building naturally and get a Warmog's third if you want, and you would automatically have it triggered. No more awkward Ruby Crystal. It would be right on time around level 11 to get a Warmogs if you want to be ready for those kind of late game rotations and team fights. So I think that's an extremely powerful buff, potentially for Soraka. So it's not just that. Also, the regeneration is increased from 3% to 5%. Massive. I mean, that's 60% more healing. You get 25% of your maximum health every 5 seconds now. That's insane. That's 5% max health per second. So that is massive. So that's a huge amount of extra regeneration that you're getting. And it triggers after 6 seconds instead of 8. So you only have to be out of combat for 6 seconds, which is huge. That's 25% faster that you can trigger it. And if you just happen to get hit by a minion or a monster, then it only goes on a 3-second cooldown. So if you just accidentally, trigger some like raptor camps, or you're just trying to run through a lane to go help your allies and you get hit by some minions, it only goes on cooldown for 3 seconds instead of the full 8 seconds. So what does this mean? This means that the passive is going to be able to access much earlier in the game. You're going to be able to access it a lot easier earlier in the game. It's going to regenerate much faster. It's going to trigger much faster, and it's going to regenerate for much, much more. So for Soraka, this means that, you know, in combat, you're healing people. If you just fade out of combat, or let's say that you have a fight, like a really common kind of mid-game scenario. Let's say that you just had a fight and you killed somebody middle lane, right? So you killed somebody, everybody's kind of hurt. You've been doing a ton of healing during the whole fight. It was a really arduous fight. And let's say that you killed maybe one person. But everyone on your team is at like half health and you're just, you know, hovering around 10% health or whatever. And you're just like, oh my God, you know. So maybe you could contest Baron because they're all really hurt too. And they're standing around this tower, right? So maybe they're all at 50%, you're all at 50%. But they still have enough threat. Let's say you killed their jungler. But, you know, maybe they have a little bit of AoE damage. There's still some threat on the table there. So you still have plenty of mana left, but your health is at 10%. Well, now, and you might think, well, we can't go do Baron because I'm too low on health. I can't heal anybody. I'm going to get one-shotted by anything. Everyone else is too low. We just can't do it. But if you have Warmogs, you back up. By the time you walk over to Baron with the increase to healing, you're going to be full health probably. Like, it's going to be insane healing. Especially because, remember, I believe Wind Speakers affects yourself. Healing on yourself. It might only be on allies. I'd have to go look. But even just Wind Speakers aside, even with just the plus healing off of Redemption and just the flat healing that Warmogs is going to give you, you'll probably be full health by the time you walk to Baron. So you'll go from 10% to full in about that time, which is crazy. But it's insane healing. And then by the time you're there, you just hang out, get vision control, and then just top everybody off with healing. Because your healing is going to be through the roof. So now all of a sudden your team is full health, positioning for Baron. They're still at half health. They can't back or you're going to get the Baron. And you can just muscle your way into a Baron because everyone's going to be full health while you're standing here. Especially if you just stand outside of that Baron range and just walk in and heal people every now and then. You're going to be able to do it. Or let's say that you have a crazy fight around Baron. A couple of people die and a lot of your people are hurt. Just heal them on the way and then you can go pick up towers. So the Warmog's passive, even right now, is very, very strong for these kinds of rotations where you win a fight and you want to go take an objective, but your team is low and you just don't have any gas left in the tank. Or let's say you get an inhibitor here, but you've healed people and you're sitting at about 10% health. You want to go down and try to pressure maybe another tower or another inhibitor, but they're about to spawn. And a lot of your allies are low also. If you have Warmogs, you can rotate down there, heal them, and your whole team's going to be back to full. Or just during a normal siege, right? Like a standard use of Warmogs would be, you just don't get hit by anything. You hang out outside of combat. If they ever poke you or hit you with anything, you just heal the person that got hit. And you just almost have endless health for your team. Because remember, her W doesn't cost that much later in the game. You know, it's only 70 mana, whereas like a Janna's shield, and it's only on a 2-second cooldown, whereas like a Janna's shield costs 100 mana later on. So it's much, much cheaper. The cost is your health, but if there is no health cost, obviously that gets into overpowered territory pretty quickly. So I think that Warmogs might actually be like a legit really good thing. It's like fringe useful sort of in some games right now, but I think that's going to be much, much better later on. I mean, you get a 10% CDR, which is pretty nice too. It's decent, but it's possible. So where would this fit into the itemization path then? It's totally possible, and I need to hurry this up. I don't want it to be much longer than you know, an hour and a half, but I know people want a lot of information about Soraka, and she's one of the most beloved champions on the channel. And so I just want to give you all this as an early sort of heads up to get excited about 7.9 if you're a Soraka fan. So it's possible that you may not get Locket anymore because fights are going to be so long that just having that burst shield just may not matter. The same might be true of Redemption, although Redemption does give you the plus healing and the mana regen that you need. So I think Redemption's still going to be, you're still going to have to get Redemption, but you may not have to get Locket anymore because fights are going to be so long and it's just going to be tank on tank fighting that having that extra burst shield just may not matter. It might be more important for you to stay alive and to have that extra healing. So if you don't get Locket anymore, then you could substitute either a Warmogs or a Gargoyle or perhaps Ardent Censer on Soraka. So, new itemization path might look something like Mobility Boots, Redemption, Ruby Sightstone, then either Gargoyle Plate or Warmogs, depending on whether you want to siege or whether you're afraid you're going to get bursted. Gargoyle is going to be better in team fights against burst, but Warmogs is going to be better for rotations and healing. And then Ardent Sensor is going to be better if you need that extra bit of damage to cut through tanks, because you're going to be handing out that extra attack speed. So it just depends on what's going to be going on. But I think Warmogs will definitely be in contention as a potential item after you get Redemption, Ruby Sightstone, and you're looking for that third item around level 11. I think it definitely could be something that's on the table. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about how to lane. So you want to push your lane as fast as possible, typically as Soraka. So use your Q, try to hit the enemy, hit the back line, push it forward. Just be aware that you might get ganked also. So, you know, if you suspect that Lee Sin's going to come down and camp you, then you may not want to do that. You may want to chill. But if they're going to camp top potentially, and you have to think about what the matchups are, what the compositions are, where the jungler is likely to go. But she can push pretty quickly with her Q on the back wave early on. And she can harass the enemy. So just spam your Q on the enemy. Try to push it in. Auto attack as much as you can. Just don't get into all-in situations. You just want to poke, hit them with Qs, heal, keep poking. So do not try to fight all in, unless maybe you're with a Draven or something. You can consider it. But mostly just push and poke. Okay? Be careful for ganks. Back up if the jungler can be near. You do not have good escapes. You will die if you get flanked, probably. Or you're at least going to have to blow your flash. So be very careful. Try to avoid all ends, as I just talked about, unless the enemy is really low. Your job is just to pressure and sustain. That's going to bring the jungler down. The bottom lane is going to be crying, they're in our tower the entire time. So, you know, just be careful that you're aware of that they will be crying, and that the jungler will probably come down and visit you at least once or twice. So a lot of that is going to rely on good ward coverage, but a lot of it's also just going to rely on backing up and being smart. If you put it into their tower, it puts damage on the tower, it makes it more difficult to last hit, and it makes it easier for you to land your Qs for harass. So being in the tower is where you want to be, as long as you don't get engaged on. Okay, a good consideration for Soraka is whenever you back, if you don't need the Sightstone right away, if you're in kind of a tough lane and you need regeneration, let's say you're getting pushed in a tower because your AD carry is just not pushing the wave, or they're just eating a lot of harass, or you're just really scared, like maybe they have a like a Leona Draven lane or something like that, and you can't go up and push the lane that much. I don't remember how they spell Fairy Charm in the game. There's a few different ways you can spell Fairy, but anyways, a nice defensive back could be Ruby Crystal plus 2 Fairy Charms, a Reju Bead, and a Control Ward. So this is something I've been doing a lot more rather than just running flat Sightstone, which is good, but if you need that regeneration for lane, just to help your AD carry out a lot more, then you can just go ahead and get half of the Sightstone on your first back, get the regeneration suite, and get a Control Ward. So if you're getting pushed into lane here, let's say you're constantly getting pushed in bottom, you don't have a ton of great places for Sightstone, because you're not going to be able to leave that often, or you're going to be missing a ton of experience under tower. So really, you might be able to ward this bush, but kind of what's the point if you keep getting pushed in? Like, the best places you can ward are going to be this bush, and dragon, right? But they're almost certainly going to sweep or pink either this or this. So these are going to be off the table. At least one of them is probably going to be off the table. So you're going to have one ward you can put down. You can still ward dragon, which is okay. But your warding options are very, very limited if you're pushing a tower. So you just may not be able to maximize that Sightstone in a useful way. So you could just use your normal trinket wards for just one more back, get the regeneration, make sure that although you're getting poked down and pushed in, your AD carry's topped off, you're in a decent spot regeneration-wise, and you're still ready to buy the Sightstone on that next back. And that control ward you can pop like right here, or maybe right here, just to help your mid lane get some vision of this area, and that'll help protect dragon as well. So a lot of times people will check this bush for a pink, and if they do, if your mid lane has lost control as well, and your jungler's just not ever down here, then you might want to pink this instead, because they're less likely to look in this bush. Okay, and they're less likely to see anything that's... they're just less likely to find the pink ward in this bush. So that's a decent buy. So you would buy that stuff, roll down, put your pink ward either here or here, use your trinket ward on the dragon, hang out in tower, and then when that trinket ward expires, go down, put another trinket ward, and then that's not as good a ward coverage, obviously, as Sightstone, but it'll give you something while also be able to have some regeneration. Now, if you're pushing them in the tower constantly and they're just not putting up much resistance and you think you might get ganked soon, then yes, buy the Sightstone. Then you can get your vision here, ward over the Dragon Pit, ward here, and then you might even be able to ward into here to see the jungler. So, obviously, more vision is good. I'm not saying don't get Sightstone or don't get vision. I'm just saying that if you're pushed in and you need more regeneration, that's also a buy that you might be able to do. Okay. Then you want to get 3 points in Q for laning, and then max your W 7 to 10. Okay, and then for team fights, you want to wait in the back, heal priority, champions, so heal your AD carry or your mage, just whoever's important, whoever does the most damage, you want to be protecting that person. Spam your Q on any target in range. Ideally, hit important things that are chasing your AD carry, but as long as you're just hitting anything with your Qs, it's probably fine. It'll slow stuff down, it'll heal you, and it'll help you heal your enemies faster. Be careful, smart teams will try to dive you and aim for you, so just position carefully. Use your E to disrupt divers, silence anyone that's trying to get on your AD carry, and just be sure to use your redemption and lock it appropriately. So I'm just going to show a little bit of footage here, just to show you how you might lane, and then we'll go ahead and end the guide. I know this one's a bit longer than others, but I wanted to cover some 7.9 stuff in here, just to kind of give you the scoop, give you the heads up, because I think a lot of this... I just read Soraka massively buff. That's what I see. Everyone's talking about tanks. I think it's Soraka that's going to be through the roof, but we'll see. It's good news if you like Soraka, which I do, and I know a lot of people on the channel do. Okay, so let's look at some laning footage here. I went ahead and muted it. This is from a stream. Just how you might think about playing the laning phase. So you're just walking up, just trying to land Qs, Q auto. They're going to hit you with some stuff. That's fine. We're still getting pushed in because Kate's not really autoing the wave. Okay, she got a couple of good hits in there. Nice. We're just landing some Qs. We're backing up because they have wave priority. Don't want to auto too much because the minions will start hitting us, especially that cannon minion. Really hurts early on. Just look at my mana pool. It basically never goes down. You just Q, auto, back up. Wait a few seconds. Q's already back up. As soon as they walk back up, I'll go for it again. So I'm just kind of standing in front of the wave. Just letting them know if you walk up to this, I'm going to hit you with a Q probably. Just trying to scare him a little bit. I don't want to eat her W's for free though, so you got to be a little careful. So I'm just walking up, throwing Qs. But it doesn't really matter if you miss. Just look at my mana pool right now. So auto to get rid of that. I should have just used a Q on it. Getting harassed a little bit. Silenced. Now they don't have... This is a lane. This is a quintessential anti-engage range. They don't have the engage until level 6 with Malzahar, so we should just be able to bully them out. Malzahar's just not going to do anything early. So I'm missing a few Qs in here. Let's go ahead and speed it up to 330. So it's just... That's kind of your pattern. You just want to walk up. I should be throwing even more Qs in here. Because, there we go. Q, auto. I take some hits back. Doesn't matter. Gonna heal through it. Let's go ahead and boost up to 330. But you can see, now we're starting to gain control of the lane. We're pushing up. I should be throwing even more Qs here. Like, I'm hanging out in the back, if you're wondering, because I don't know where the jungler is. I think I just pinged the jungler. And we're out of wards right now, so... Yeah, I could be up there in their face doing more, but I'm really scared of this jungler, so... I'm trying to hang out in the back. Okay, so we just keep landing. We see Lee's top, so we can be a little bit more aggressive here. Q auto. Q's going to be back up again. Getting our 3 points in Q. I could have probably snuck an auto in there. Go ahead and heal Kate here. You want to keep your AD carry topped off as much as you can early on because your Q, or your W rather, has a pretty long cooldown. You want to heal them after you land a Q though. See, she gets that little extra healing over time. Okay, so now we're pushing him in. We're getting him into the tower. Now we just saw Lee top, but he could be coming down bottom again, so I'm pinging it. Trying to ward. autoing, just trying to land some more Qs under tower. My mana pool, like, if you start healing a lot, your mana pool will go down. I don't think one more... I could have autoed her one more time. I don't think it would have killed her, but I could have maybe snuck in one more auto before. Now, Lee's coming. You gotta be a little careful here. He hits me. As soon as he goes in, silence him so he can't kick me back. I think maybe the exhaust was a little unnecessary. Okay, so that heal saved her probably from the kick. Okay, so I just want to keep healing her. Now, I am getting a little low on mana now because I've healed a lot. Now, she just loses her mind here, tries to flash auto right in front of this Malzahar. I heal her. She walks back into the minions. If she had kept walking towards me, I could have aggroed the minions. And we could have walked out of it, but that's fine. I just leveled up my R, like, right after she died, the cannon minion fell. That's just kind of how fights go. You just harass. If someone tries to dive you, just silence them. Keep hitting Qs. Okay, now let's go to 8:30, and I'll show you what can go wrong. With Soraka. So some of the challenges of Soraka here. Okay. So we see everyone's wanting to dive. They're all coming down. Mid lane's also missing. Kassadin's not coming down. This is very important. That mid lane's missing, and Kassadin is not roaming down with the rest of the team. So, okay. Now that was bad. We should not be diving that. And so the reason that we shouldn't go in there is we don't have proper vision. Mid lane's missing. They have a GP who I believe has teleport and is ult. And we're diving behind the tower, and we don't have a wave in the tower. You see the wave is positioned here. So we have no retreat path. If this starts going south, we're dead. Because there's just no way, there's nowhere to run. We're going to have to run back through here. Which, if the mid laner comes around, they're going to come through here and cut us off. They have this tri-bush pink warded, so they could come around and flank behind us. So this is a really, really bad decision. This is the Clown Fiesta. Alright, so we're just trying to heal people as much as we can. We're going to exhaust the Ashe here. We're just still trying to heal and keep this up. And there's Anivia. So Anivia outroamed the Kassadin. Which I can't even believe I'm saying that, but that's what happened. Anivia outroamed the Kassadin. And she's going to clean up. So we have nowhere to go. Like, she just got this massive AoE. She does a ton of damage at level 6. Ashe is in a pretty safe position. And I just have nowhere to run. Like, she walls me off. I either run into the tower or I run into the Ashe. I guess I should have probably run towards the Ashe. I think I was just freaked out because I didn't know what was going on. And, like, we still didn't have our wave here yet. I was dead either way. It's just, how do you want to die? Either to the tower or the Ashe. But I could have walked over here and maybe preserved a bit more health. At least make them hit me a few more times. So that was a misplay for sure. Alright, so that was pretty bad. So yeah, I mean, we got a couple of kills. We are denying some minion waves at the tower. But it could have been managed much better if Kassadin roamed down, or we just straight up didn't do it. Like, we could have just forced him off of this tower without diving. And then we could have probably just taken the tower or taken the dragon. But GP got top lane. And he got some more damage in there. Okay, so that was overall. That's what can go wrong. So that's kind of with Soraka. If you get caught into these clown fiestas, like, you're not getting out. Like, with Janna, I maybe could have escaped that. Maybe. Like, I could have potentially, you know, run through the tower, shielded myself, and, like, tornadoed behind me. And, like, maybe I could have gotten out of it. But she can't protect herself. That's the thing. Janna can shield herself and run. Soraka cannot heal herself. So if they get on her, it's a big problem. Okay, so let's look at kind of a late game team fight. Okay. Now we just got Baron. Let's see. Did we have a fight before that? Maybe we did. Let me see. Okay. Alright, so we're trying to take Baron here. Nivea's coming up. Throw a couple of Qs at her. It doesn't really matter that much, but we're just kind of zoning her, trying to scare her. This is very dangerous. We've got to exhaust the Malzahar. He can do a lot of damage, even with really no items early. So I'm trying to throw the Redemption down, just trying to keep everybody topped off. Lock it there. Didn't really need to lock it. Use my ult, save Trendamere. Alright, we cleaned it up. I just kind of overkilled it on the cooldowns because I know Baron's on the line. So I just know if we win this fight, Like 100% we're going to get to Baron. So just went ahead and used it all. Heal, exhaust, ult, locket, redemption. Okay, so just keeping people topped off. I should be healing that Kassadin some more. There we go. Yeah, I should have kept healing him a little bit more here so that he's topped off. I think I heal him some more in a second. Being a bit too conservative with my heal. Because he's the top priority. I mean, Kassadin, if he's on your team ever, like, he's such a powerhouse. You just have to keep him up, and he'll just carry the whole game. I think he's the most overpowered champion right now. Patch 7.8. Okay, healing him up. I should have already had him healed all the way. Alright, so Lee tries to go onto her. Heal. Yeah. I probably should have locketed there, too. That was a bit close. But yeah, you just kind of hang out. Just heal the priority targets. Pretty straightforward, typically. Like, really, your only major chances for, like, massive outplays are, like, if you silence something at the right time. But, you know, just consistently throwing out Qs or Ws, locketing, and using your Qs. I could definitely be queuing a lot more in fights, and I could be healing a lot more. She has very, very low cooldowns once you get CDR, so you just need to constantly spam spells and reposition. So that's really the challenge with her. It's not like making any huge, very visually, like, game-sweeping powerhouse plays, like, oh my god, you hit that hook or whatever. It's just constantly repositioning, hitting your Qs, and casting your Ws, and staying in a safe position. So it's just persistent stuff, little small things that you need to keep doing, which add up a lot over time. So she doesn't have that big, like, burst skill shot that gets her, you know, a lot of notoriety with people. But it's just persistent stuff that you need to keep doing. So that's something that, you know, I don't play Soraka a ton. I do play her some. But that's something that I definitely need to work on myself as Soraka, is just constantly casting more heals, more Qs, and just keep that coming. Okay. And that's going to be it for Soraka. So I hope you enjoyed it. Very thorough guide. Usually they aren't this long. They're about an hour long. This one's probably about an hour and a half. A little bit longer, an hour and a half. But I did want to have this section in here for the 7.9 because I think people are always asking me, well, what do I think about 7.9? What do I think about 7.9? Well, this is what I think. I think it's going to be really good for Soraka. So I just wanted to go into that into some detail there. So thank you very much. Be sure to email me if you're interested in commissioning a guide or you'd like to see a guide. If you want some coaching, you can email me about that. Be sure to watch the coaching playlist. If you're new to the channel, I'll go ahead and show you around just really quickly at the end. Maybe. There we go. I don't know why there was that delay. Yeah, if you're new to the channel, we have a lot of guides, so I'm going to add Soraka, but we've got Karma, we've got Rakan, Bard, Tahm Kench, Vel'Koz. Like I said, most of these are about an hour. Some of them are about an hour and a half, depending on the champion. But yeah, they're about an hour, but they have the detailed Google Doc. They have the detailed descriptions. So all of that should be super helpful to help you navigate it. We have playlists, so if you just want to watch me play all Janna, all Nautilus, Tahm Kench, I do have some Soraka that I'm adding in a little bit more all the time. That can be very helpful. All those coaching sessions that I mentioned before, you can go through and watch those. So even if you can't really afford commissioning a coaching video, I think watching them can be super helpful. The topical guides, very helpful. So if you want to know about strategies for picks, bans, and even dodges, that's a really cool video. For example, a nice little tidbit out of that is your first dodge of the day. You should dodge if you have less than a 40% chance to win statistically. You'll save yourself 1 LP on average, and over the course of 200 games, that'll save you 2 divisions. So that'll help you get from Silver 2 to that coveted Gold 5, for example, so that you get those rewards, or maybe even Platinum 2 to Diamond. So that's just something that is not really talked about anywhere else on YouTube, at least not that I've ever been able to find, but it's really, really important for gaining. I mean, that's a similar concept where in poker, people fold most of their hands. Like seasoned poker players know that, but like amateur poker players won't realize that. They'll think, oh, I should actually play most of my hands because if I fold, I'm losing a little bit of money because of the blinds, for example. where in fact that's not the case. You need to sacrifice and lose a little bit of LP off your dodges, just as you would in poker, where you need to fold and lose a little bit in order to gain in the long run. You need to have a long con kind of perspective, and dodging is very, very important. So that's something, just a very small tidbit, a teaser. If you want to check out that video, there's a lot of other great stuff in there. I tell you different methods for how you can calculate your chance to win. I tell you different sort of guiding theories behind what you should ban and like what you should pick in theory. Not like exactly you must ban this champion or pick this champion, but just theoretical concepts. Like these type of champions are typically really good to pick early on, and then these type of champions are really good to ban. So it's never super prescriptive, anything on this channel. I don't tell you exactly what to do. I try to give you the critical tools to help you make those decisions. And these guides are no different. They're very, very helpful. And in particular, with the support tier list guide, I'll click on that really quickly. I think I mentioned this earlier in the stream, but it's in depth. It's got the description in here. But something special that I do with the Google Doc and the tier list is you can actually see mini guides for each one of these champions. So if you don't have time to watch the entire guide that I give,
Saya and Rakan, and then we're going to be going over the.
Sorry about that. I thought I had that muted. So it's not just a tier list, like, oh, here's what I think is the best champion. I describe it in depth, but I'll also give you these guides. So if you just want to look at a mini guide, maybe I don't have a full guide for it yet, but you just want some quick information. So let's say, I don't know, you're like, oh, I saw him play Fiddlesticks a couple of times on stream. Why would he do that? What are some specific situations? You just click on it. I give you a little mini guide, and you can see who I think Fiddlesticks is good with, who he's good against, who he's bad with, who he's bad against, recommended items, runes, and masteries. So just a really quick snapshot guide that you can see right there on one page. I give you that for about the top 20 champions. I think it's 18 or so right now. So it's a very interactive tier list that gives you some really good suggestions for thinking about when you might pick specific champions, and when maybe you should avoid them, items, runes, all that good stuff. So lots and lots of really good information there. I think I put, if I do say so myself, I think I put more time and effort into my tier list than anyone else on YouTube. So, you know, you might disagree with the way that I order some things, and that's fine. Everyone has their opinion about tier lists, but I think it's helpful to generate ideas, to get you thinking about ways that you might improve your own play. Even if you don't follow my exact line of reasoning, it at least should inspire you to think about your own reasoning in a different way, and that's really the goal. Okay, so thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. I really had a good time making this guide, and thanks again to Mr. Magpie and Disciple of Yawgmoth for sponsoring this. I really appreciate it, and so does everyone else out there. You know, we really appreciate your support of the channel to keep me doing the great things that I can keep doing. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.